Okay, hi there guys, welcome to another C Sharp tutorial. And today's tutorial we are going to speak about floating point numbers. Basically, if you want to define a floating point number, you could just write float, okay? For example, let's say x equal 10. So that's the same style. Now, here, uh, the 10 here is an integer. It will be converted to floating point number and put into x. We could say 10.2, for example. And we need to put a capital F over here so that it knows that this is a float. Okay, if you don't put F over here, it will treat the number differently. It will treat it as double precision number. Okay, we'll get into that later on. But for now, remember, whenever you use floating point numbers, make sure to put an F at the end. Okay, so how do you read floating point numbers on the screen? Well, basically, you could use the same technique you use with integers. All you have to say you could say x equal load dot parse open a bracket system uh, dot console dot read line. Okay, um, and if you want to display that float number, you could just say system console write line. Okay, and you pass the x into that. That's as simple as that, and you should use system console read line over here just to make sure the screen doesn't go away. So now let's run this. And yeah, we should say 92.3, and you can see that this is our floating point number. Unlike the previous case when we tried reading integers, passing a number containing a decimal point would trigger error in that case. Here we don't have this issue. Okay, so now let us just experience with this one. Okay, so the simplest example we could work on is, for example, calculating the interest for 1 month. Let's say we know your salary, we know the interest rate. How do you calculate the interest? Okay, so we're gonna do that. Basically, we need to know this, uh, not the salary, but rather the saving amount. Okay, float interest rate. Simple. To have these two, we need to display a friendly message. So system console write. Okay, enter your uh, saving amount. Okay, and right now we're gonna say saving amount equal float dot parse. Open that. This is gonna be system console read line. Okay, wonderful. And then we need to read the other number. Uh, enter enter the bank's interest rate. Okay, and what we could do is interest rate equal float dot parse system console read line. Okay, uh, and what happens here is calculating the amount of interest float uh, increase equals saving amount multiply this by what interest rate. And finally, we need to display the results. So just system cancel write line amount you're saving increases by this. Sorry. We just say if the increase. There you go. Okay, this is the whole statement. Okay, and finally, system cancel read line. Okay, so far so good. This is very easy. So let us try this out and let us run this. So let's say I have $1,000 in the bank, and the interest rate is assumed a high one, so this is 0.5. Okay. Now the issue here, this is wrong because it's not like this. I'm sorry. I have $1,000 and the interest is 0.25. This is not 0.25, 0.25. Okay. So an interest rate of 0.025, it means 2.5%. So basically, I got an increase of $25. Okay. Yeah. So this is a very simple example. Uh, Let us try to do something a little bit different. Let us say 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's say this number of 0.001. Okay. Now, uh, so let us check this out. Now, what happens? What happens uh, if you want to enter the interest rate as an integer? Okay, as a percentage. Sorry, what I mean here is that, for example, you want to enter, uh, uh, you know, if you enter 1, it means 1%. If you enter 2, it means 2%. Okay, so here I'm gonna print this, make it 0 to let's say 10. Okay, so this is the interest rate. Okay, and the thing you could do is simply put the bracket over here and divide this by 100. Okay. In order to make this a little bit understandable, let us see how this is going to work. So I am having 1,000. Now the interest rate of the bank is 2%. This is what I mean here. So you can see now a 2% interest rate is a result in 20. So what happened here is that I didn't enter the exact interest rate number, but rather I entered it multiplied by 100. So all I have to do is just to now reduce this by uh, reduce this by sorry, convert it into the actual number. Now there is something very important to notice here. We can get errors very easily in this case. Now this number is what? This is an integer. Okay, if this number is an integer, for example, I wrote this and I wrote this int. So now this would result in an integer division. So 2 divided by 100 is actually 0.02. Okay, we said in the previous tutorial that integers, when you have floating point numbers, uh, the floating point part will be removed and only integer will be kept. So, and 0.02 will be converted into 0. So let us check out and see if this is true or not. So let's run this. 1, 2, 3, 1000, and we enter 2 here. and you get the result 0. Okay, again, the reason for this is the computer sees this as what? As integer divided by what? Another integer. So this is an integer division, so the result will be only an integer. It doesn't matter what you have here, okay? But matters is that in the order of this execution, we are having, an integer division. One way to solve this is to convert this into float. Okay, so we could just say float. Okay, although here we said this is an integer and we parse it, then, okay, let me just show you that it's working, and then we'll explain why it's working. So 1002, and now it's working again. So why it's working here? We said here we are reading an integer. Well, basically, we read an integer, we put that integer into this box or variable, which is a floating point number. Now, when the computer tries to perform a division, it will check and see that this is a floating point number. Okay, although the content of this floating point number is an integer, and you are dividing this by an integer, the data type of the variable is a floating point number. What's important is the data type of the variable. Okay, so the data type here is floating point divided by the data type here, which is integer, results in a floating point result. Okay, and then we are applying this here. Okay, so there's another way to solve this. So let me just put this one as an integer here. Make sure the error reappears. So 3, and we put 2 here, and we're getting 0, which is totally wrong. Okay, we could just say, open a bracket here, close the bracket here. Okay, so now we change the location of the bracket. So what's gonna happen is the computer will execute this part first and then execute this part later. Let's run this. So 1000.2, and now it's working again. So what is happening? What's happening is this. Sorry. The computer takes a look here. Usually, the part that gets executed first is the part between brackets. So, what's the data type of saving amount? Saving amount is a floating point number. This is multiplied by interest rate, which is an integer. Now, when multiplying a floating point number by an integer number, the result will be stored as floating point number. So the result of all this is as if you are removing this and replacing it with a single floating point number. This is the first thing. Now, dividing a floating point number by an integer would result in a floating point number. Okay, so this is very important to remember because you will get many errors, okay, because of the of using the wrong data type. This is a source of many errors, so we need to pay attention to that. Okay, so let me put this one the way it was, where it was causing problems, and see that and look at another method to solve this issue. Okay, so first let us make sure it's causing a problem again, and 2, it's causing a problem. Okay, so the last thing we could try is perform casting. So we want the compiler to understand that this should not be treated as integer. It should be treated as a floating point number. So you could open a bracket over here, write float, and close the bracket here. Okay? Okay, so when the compiler sees this, it will take whatever data type available here. Regardless of that data type, it is gonna convert it into float number. So if it is 2, it will treat it as 2.0 and then divide it by an integer resulting in a floating point result and so on. So let's try this out. We would say 1002 and now it is working again. Okay, another technique, okay, is to just put a point 0 and capital F over here. Now this will understand, the compiler will understand this is not 100, this is a floating point 100. Okay, so it will be an integer divided by a floating point number. So we just also right here and 2, it will work as well. Okay, uh, yeah. So all these methods, the point of this example, the important thing is that when performing calculations, if you are having floating point numbers, make sure at least one of the parameters, okay, or one of the operands of the floating point of the operations is a floating point number, because if both are integers and the result contains floating point or a fraction, the fraction will be lost. Okay, so just remember that when performing some kind of operations that result in a fraction, if both parameters are integers, the fraction is lost. If one of the parameters is a floating point, the fraction does not get lost. Okay, so this is an important thing about the floating point number. Okay, now after finishing this, let's talk a little bit about the storage of a floating point. So what's the maximum value and the minimum value to store? Well, the same thing. If you remember with integers, we uh, we had max value and minimum value, right? So test 10 semicolon. Now we could do the same thing here. We could say system console right line. The max is yes, okay. Okay. Wait a second. Float dot max value. There you go. Okay. And system console right line. The min is min value. Okay. So if we run this, we get to know the maximum and minimum value. And what this means, the maximum is 3.402 whatever multiplied by 10 to power 38. And the minimum is minus 3.4 something multiplied to the power of 10 to power 38. This is what it means. Okay, this is the scientific format. Okay, so this is how you could get the maximum and minimum. And basically, if you put a dot after the floating point number, you will have other values like, for example, infinity or yeah, uh, positive infinity, negative infinity. I never use that, but in some operations in C# might result in an unknown value, and you will get one of these like NaN, which is unknown. I think negative infinity or positive infinity. So unlike the case in C and C++, where you don't get such things. You will get whatever available in the memory as garbage, for example. In our case, you will get something. Okay, so let's try this out. If we have a test here, um, okay, let me show you the default value here. Usually, unlike C and C++, uh, a variable defined in C# always have a default value. Okay, I can show you this. Here we didn't assign anything to test. Okay, so so now this one is yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this one's objecting because I didn't assign it a value here. Okay, so I stand corrected. For some reason, I'm mixing C# with Visual Basic, so I'm very sorry about that. Yeah. So basically, you need to perform an assignment for each variable before using it. Okay. So, given that, let us try to use another example here. It's not going to be a practical example, but just a simple one that um, yeah, just a simple example for calculating the average marks of a student. Okay, so let's say each student is having 3 marks, and you want to find the average for that student. So basically, you need to provide or store int m1, m2, and m3, and called avg for average. So now we should say system console right line enter marks semicolon and m1 equals input parse console read line. Okay, this is the first one, m1, m2, and m3. So we got these 3 marks, and now we need to calculate the average. And so avg equals m1 plus m2 plus m3, and we divide by 3. Now pay attention here. This is integer. This is integer. This is integer. What this means, the result of all of this is integer. So an integer divided by 3, which is also an integer, this will remove the floating uh, or the fraction part of the result. Okay, and we'll get the wrong result. So I won't fix it here. I'll just show you that. Console, right line, average is average. Okay. So let us say we have what 99, 83, and 57. Okay, we get a 79. So you see the result is an integer there, right? Yeah. So let us try this out, but this time we could just solve this easily. 0.0f. So it will understand that this is a floating point number. So integer by divided by floating point, resulting in a floating point number. We now uh, equals 99, 86, right? Sorry, 7, 5, 6, 7. Okay, you can see now the average now is a floating point number. Okay, I mean the result, final result, have fractional part. Okay, this part is not missing. Okay, so this is basically how you work with a floating point number. The important point is never forget the data types, or assume that the result of an operation will result in a floating point. Never assume that. Always make sure that when you are dividing 2 numbers, okay, and you want to keep the fraction, one of them at least need to be a floating point number. Never forget that. Otherwise, you will get errors, and the program would look like if it is correct, but it is not. Because the compiler will see integer divided by an integer, and it will mean to the compiler that the floating point part needs to be deleted. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and we will have another lesson tomorrow. Okay? Have a nice day. Bye bye.